On June 24th, 2007, the world of professional wrestling woke up to a tragedy that would forever change its history. Chris Benoit, former WWE World Heavyweight Champion, was found dead alongside his wife, Nancy, and their young son, Daniel, inside their home in Fayetteville, Georgia. At first, everyone believed it was a terrible family tragedy. But then the truth came out. It was a cold-blooded murder. Chris Benoit killed his wife and son before taking his own life. What could turn a loving father and a beloved wrestling icon into a killer? Steroids, brain trauma, obsession, depression. What piece of the puzzle led to that fatal weekend? And why did WE erase Chris Benoit's name from its history books? This wasn't just a case. It was the collapse of a legend. A chilling wake-up call about the dark side of sports entertainment. Chris Benoit, cold-blooded murderer, or a victim of an inhumane system? Today, we retrace his final hours and attempt to answer the question the world still can't make sense of. Chris Benoit wasn't just another name in the wrestling world. He was a living legend, known for his brutal in-ring style, iron discipline, and unmatched dedication. From his early days in Japan to the pinnacle of WWE, Benoit earned his victories through blood, sweat, and silent sacrifice. At 40, he was still a powerhouse, never slowing down, constantly performing in the ring despite the travel, despite the injuries. Despite being nicknamed the Rabid Wolverine, Benoit was beloved, especially in Canada, where people saw two sides of him. A fierce warrior in the ring and a gentle father at home. Chris Jericho once said, "Chris was always a great dad. Family meant everything to him." But behind the spotlight was a life full of pressure. Wrestling careers don't last long. The price of glory is often permanent damage, broken bones, torn ligaments, and brain trauma. Benoit was no exception. He used steroids to maintain his strength, and decades of punishing blows had slowly, relentlessly destroyed his brain, piece by piece. His body shattered,
wrestlers get
his
banged
heart
up,
exhausted, his mind in chaos. No one knows when the darkness began to consume him, and no one could stop it in time. With Chris Benoit, being late was never an option. If there was a wrestling event, he would be there, on time, on schedule, exactly as expected. Which is why what happened on June 23rd, 2007 was almost impossible to believe. Just days earlier, Benoit had started to worry his friends. He was used to WWE's grueling schedule, but on June 22nd, he suddenly missed a show in Houston, Texas. The reason? He missed his flight. For anyone else, that might be no big deal, but for Benoit, it was a red flag. The first to sense something was wrong was Chavo Guerrero, longtime friend and fellow wrestler. During a phone call, Benoit sounded off. His voice was shaky, tired, emotional. He expressed affection, as if it might be the last time they ever spoke. Chris explained that his wife, Nancy, was vomiting blood, and their son, Daniel, was seriously ill. Chavo assumed it was a family emergency, and that Benoit would catch the next flight to Houston. But he didn't. Instead, came a string of strange voice messages. Benoit apologized for missing the show. He said he'd catch the next flight, but his voice trembled. His sentences were broken, disjointed, barely coherent. He claimed he'd arrive by 8 a.m., a time that made no sense given any available flight. What began as a personal issue was now turning into something far more disturbing. It wasn't just Chavo. People in WWE were starting to get uneasy. Everyone knew Benoit as a consummate professional. He never missed a show, never disappeared without a reason. And then, in his final message to Chavo, he said, "I love you," a phrase so unlike Benoit, so uncharacteristic of him. That's when the sinking feeling set in that something terrible was coming. Chavo Guerrero tried to brush off his unease. He told himself maybe Chris was just overwhelmed. His wife and son were sick, the pressure piling up, and the strange messages were nothing more than exhaustion talking. But a gut instinct told him not to ignore it. Just 12 minutes after receiving the voicemail, Chavo called Benoit back. No answer. He left a message at 3:44 p.m. asking Benoit to return the call as soon as possible. Benoit sighed, then replied, "It's just been a tough day. Nancy and Daniel are both sick. I'm exhausted." Chavo didn't buy it. He'd known Chris long enough to recognize when his friend was hiding something. Still, he didn't push further. The call ended with a quiet but heartfelt message. "If you need to talk, I'm here." Then came the early hours of Sunday, June 24th. At exactly 3:51 a.m., both Chavo Guerrero and Scott Armstrong, Chris Benoit's two closest friends, received a series of strange text messages. One of them was simply the address of Benoit's home, 130 Green Meadow Lane. Another message said that the dogs had been secured in the enclosed pool area, and that the garage door was left open. It was all incredibly odd, but it was also nearly 4 in the morning. Half asleep, they figured it might have just been a mistake, and went back to bed. They had no idea. That would be the last time Chris Benoit ever spoke. At first, Chavo Guerrero and Scott Armstrong thought about ignoring the messages. Weird as they were, they didn't sound threatening, and more importantly, they came from Chris Benoit, a man who was notoriously private, hard to read, and known for keeping things to himself. But then, an entire Sunday passed. No calls, no texts. No signs of Chris making his way to the WWE event as scheduled. Chavo grew anxious. He tried calling Benoit again multiple times. No answer. Scott Armstrong also attempted to reach him, but all they got was silence. At this point, Chavo started to remember the little details from that final Friday call. Chris's voice tired, but unusually cold. Those late-night messages, especially the one where Benoit sent his own home address, as if it were some kind of signal. A chilling feeling crept in. By Sunday afternoon, WE management had also realized Chris Benoit hadn't shown up as scheduled. He was absent without warning, something he had never done in his entire career. Vince McMahon, the WWE chairman, along with several staff members, began calling Chris's home. No one picked up. That's when the messages Benoit had sent to Chavo and Scott started to line up, and they all reached the same conclusion. Someone needed to check that house immediately. On the afternoon of June 25, 2007, WWE contacted the Fayette County Sheriff's Office in Georgia, requesting a welfare check, a type of visit used to verify the safety of someone at their home. The address, 130 Green Meadow Lane. When officers arrived, the house was eerily silent. The dogs were secured. The garage door was open, just like in the text message. There were no signs of forced entry from the outside. And then they stepped inside. 3 bodies were discovered in different parts of the Benoit home. The scene was quickly classified as a serious homicide investigation. The victims, Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy Benoit, and their 7-year-old son Daniel. Nancy was found in a spare bedroom. Her body had been wrapped in a blanket. Beside her lay a Bible, a detail that sent chills through investigators. Police reported that her wrists had been bound with coaxial cable and her ankles were duct-taped. Drag marks suggested she had been pulled across the kitchen floor. They recovered an old athletic sock and blood-stained duct tape, likely used as a makeshift gag before she was strangled. An autopsy revealed that Chris Benoit had used his knee to press into Nancy's back while tightening a cord around her neck, ultimately killing her. Oddly, there were no signs of a struggle, as if Nancy never had the chance to fight back. Toxicology reports detected alcohol in her system, though it was unclear whether it was consumed before her death or was a result of post-mortem decomposition. There were also faint traces of hydrocodone and alprazolam, Xanax, but due to the advanced state of decomposition, exact concentrations couldn't be confirmed. Daniel, Chris's youngest son and Nancy's only child, was found dead in his bed in his bedroom. There were no signs of bruising, but internal injuries to Daniel's throat confirmed that the young boy had been strangled to death. Next to his body was another Bible, just like the one found beside his mother, a chilling and eerily symbolic detail. Forensic examination confirmed that Daniel had been injected with the sedative Xanax and may have been unconscious before he died. His body had begun to decompose, though it remained more intact than Nancy's, suggesting he was killed at least a day after her. Hours after murdering his son, Chris Benoit took his own life by hanging himself in the basement gym. Evidence showed he had used the cable from a weight machine, tying it around his neck and releasing the weights to strangle himself, a method that was cold, calculated, and brutally intentional. After completing the investigation and autopsies, authorities came to the following conclusion. June 22nd, Chris Benoit murdered his wife, Nancy. June 23rd, he killed his son, Daniel. June 24th, Chris Benoit committed suicide. When investigators examined Chris Benoit's internet search history, they uncovered chilling search terms enough to make anyone shudder. Among his final searches were: how to tie a knot for hanging, how long does it take for a human body to decompose? These cold clinical queries weren't the actions of someone spiraling out of control. They were calculated steps, evidence of a man meticulously planning something horrific. The last known photo of Chris Benoit was taken on June 22, 2007, at the office of Dr. Phil Estin, his personal physician. Just hours later, the nightmare would begin. The investigation later revealed another disturbing detail. Benoit had allegedly researched how to break someone's neck, a claim made by Nancy in a 2016 podcast. However, the official report from the Fayette County Sheriff's Office made no mention of such searches, and Chris's autopsy showed no signs of neck trauma fueling debate about the accuracy of Nancy's claim. Next to the bodies of Nancy and Daniel, investigators found the Bible. Inside was a slip of paper containing Chris Benoit's final message: "I'm preparing to leave this world." No one knows exactly what Benoit meant. It could have been a goodbye, a confession, or even a desperate attempt to make sense of his own mind after the brutal events that had just unfolded. Later, another letter was sent to Chris's first wife, Martina, and their 2 children living in Canada. The contents of that letter have never been publicly revealed. Chris's father, Michael Benoit, confirmed the existence of the suicide note, clear evidence that this tragedy wasn't a sudden outburst, but a calculated plan. 2 Bibles found beside Nancy and Daniel's bodies disturbed many investigators. They believed Benoit was fully aware of the crimes he committed. The brief message inside the Bible read, "I'm preparing to leave this world," a chilling line, a confession, a surrender, or maybe too little, too late remorse. In his final days, Chris Benoit lived in darkness. His once celebrated wrestling career was slowly overshadowed by years of untreated brain trauma, damage caused by decades of brutal matches inside the ring. This was the devastating result of CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy. The loss of his closest friend, Eddie Guerrero, in 2005 was the final blow. It shattered Benoit emotionally, sending his mental health into a downward spiral. The fight between his broken body and fractured mind ultimately led him to commit one of the most shocking crimes in WWE and American history. A toxicology report revealed that Chris Benoit's body had extremely high levels of testosterone, which aligned with long-term steroid abuse. Traces of Xanax and hydrocodone, two powerful sedative and pain relief medications, were also detected. These findings raised unsettling questions. Was Benoit under the influence of drugs when he killed Nancy and Daniel? No one knows for sure. But one thing is certain. His mind was no longer stable in his final days. The crime scene, autopsy reports, and toxicology analyses all pointed to a calculated series of murders, not an impulsive act driven by a moment of madness. Chris Benoit took 3 days to kill each member of his family before taking his own life. Steroids were found in the home, fueling discussions around roid rage, a theory suggesting uncontrollable violence triggered by long-term steroid use. Some medical experts argue that chronic steroid abuse can lead to severe issues such as emotional instability, paranoia, uncontrolled aggression. However, police noted one chilling detail. There was nearly a full day between Nancy's time of death and Daniel's. That gap mattered. It indicated that Chris Benoit was fully aware of what he was doing. This wasn't the result of an uncontrollable outburst. It was a deliberate, step-by-step execution. And the Bible placed beside each body Nancy and Daniel wasn't something typically seen in a fit of rage. It felt ritualistic, a haunting sign that Benoit had planned every detail of the tragedy. After the horrifying family tragedy, prosecutors in New York began digging deeper into Chris Benoit's private life. They discovered that Benoit had received multiple shipments of steroids and human growth hormone, HGH, from online pharmacies such as Signature Pharmacy and MedLife.com. Turin Klon, attorney for MedLife co-owner Gary Brandwine, denied selling steroids to Benoit, but Sports Illustrated later published evidence revealing that Benoit had received 3 shipments from Signature Pharmacy. One in December 2005, sent to Texas. Another in February 2006, sent to Peachtree City, Georgia. A third in July 2006, sent to Fort Walton Beach, Florida. This was just a small piece of a much broader investigation into steroid use within professional wrestling. Several high-profile names surfaced during the probe: Kurt Angle, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Edge, and Gregory Helms. When the bodies of Nancy and Daniel Benoit were discovered on June 25, 2007, a horrifying sequence of events began to unfold, but the full picture was never entirely clear. The initial investigation seemed straightforward. Chris Benoit had murdered his wife and son, then taken his own life. But the scene was eerily quiet. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. Nancy had been bound at the wrists and ankles, with a Bible placed beside her body. Daniel, the 7-year-old boy, also had a Bible placed next to him. Was this the act of a completely broken man? Or some twisted ritual meant to justify what he'd done? Forensics later confirmed. Chris Benoit hanged himself using a towel and a pulley system in his home gym. Contrary to popular belief, his neck didn't snap instantly. He removed the weights from a lot pull-down machine, fashioned a noose, and used the machine's own resistance to slowly choke himself to death. A cold, deliberate act, not a moment of rage. Toxicology reports showed extremely high levels of testosterone indicative of long-term steroid use. But it wasn't just the drugs. His autopsy also revealed early signs of CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, caused by years of concussions and repeated blows to the head. CTE can lead to memory loss, behavioral shifts, emotional instability, and in some cases, violence. In the end, Chris Benoit wasn't just a killer, he was also a victim of the very industry that made him a star. Was it a final moment of uncontrollable rage? A breaking point that pushed everything over the edge? Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit's closest friend, died suddenly in 2005. That loss devastated Benoit, and many believe it was the final blow that shattered his emotional stability. After Eddie's death, Benoit grew quiet, withdrawn, and seemed to be battling something he couldn't even name. Those close to him described a man spiraling into an inescapable depression. The pressure kept mounting. The emotional pain of losing his best friend, a broken-down body after decades of brutal matches, an ongoing tension within his family. It all seemed to push Benoit to the edge emotionally, and eventually, beyond the limits of reason. Christopher Nowinski, a neuroscientist and former pro wrestler, stated, "Benoit was one of the few guys who would take a steel chair shot straight to the back of the head, something incredibly dangerous and reckless. He suffered far too many concussions that were never treated." After his death, Benoit's brain was sent to a lab for analysis. Dr. Julian Bales, head of neurosurgery at West Virginia University, revealed Benoit's brain was so severely damaged it resembled that of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient. Tests also confirmed that he suffered from advanced stage CTE, a form of chronic brain damage, commonly found in athletes who experience repeated head trauma. CTE can cause severe behavioral changes, emotional instability, and violent outbursts. Benoit's father believes CTE was the root cause of the horrific tragedy, but WWE denied this, calling it speculative. Meanwhile, cracks in the marriage had already begun to show. In May 2003, Nancy filed for divorce, accusing Benoit of domestic abuse. However, she withdrew the petition 3 months later. In 2008, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported that Nancy may have suspected Benoit was having an affair with a female WE wrestler. They were also allegedly arguing about a life insurance policy. These details came from the Fayette County Sheriff's Office report. So, what truly drove a father to murder his wife and son before taking his own life? So, what truly drove a father to murder his wife and son before taking his own life? No one has a definitive answer. Only theories, scattered pieces, and an irreversible ending. WWE Chairman Vince McMahon finally spoke out. He called the Benoit family tragedy the result of a perfect storm. A complete psychological breakdown, combined with years of brutal physical trauma from professional wrestling. This wasn't just about steroids, McMahon said. It was the toll of physical destruction and emotional pressure throughout his career. Though McMahon's statement sparked intense controversy, it forced many to reconsider the real cost of the sport. Chris Benoit had clearly collapsed, not just because of drugs, not just because of domestic pressure, but because the very path to glory had slowly strangled him. Then, a disturbing detail emerged. Only 14 hours before police discovered the bodies, a mysterious edit was made to Chris Benoit's Wikipedia page. The update read, Chris Benoit was unable to attend the ECW championship match at Vengeance due to personal issues stemming from the death of his wife Nancy. The time of the edit? 4:01 a.m. on June 25th, nearly 10 hours before police found the bodies at 2:30 p.m. What made it even more chilling? The IP address was traced to Stamford, Connecticut, home of WWE's corporate headquarters. The anonymous editor later claimed it was just a bizarre coincidence. Just a coincidence. A death predicted publicly before anyone even knew about the crime scene? That question still has no satisfying answer. If you think this is one of the most bizarre parts of the case, share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to help us bring more mysterious stories to light, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.